All right, welcome in, everyone. It is time for Full Court Press. It is also $5 Tuesday. As promised yesterday, I have a 5%er up, which is not part of $5 Tuesday. Apologies that fell on Tuesday because it's still full price. But you can get around that by just jumping on the Double the Firepower CBB package for myself and Rob. You get all of our plays. And if you email in to our great customer support team, you can get it for the rest of the season. Rob, we were on kind of the same page yesterday with Louisville. That was my only play for clients. Very disappointing that Pat Kelsey just cannot win a big game. I know he hasn't been there that long, but it just seems like every time Louisville is on Big Monday or in a big spot, they just don't win. I thought yesterday would be different. I love the matchup for them. To talk about your team total, I mean, even like a half decent effort wins that game for Louisville, in my opinion. And there was so many bad shots, and yet still here they are at the end of the game, down 3. And I just, you felt like you deserve better with Louisville in that game. So frustrating to say the least. It was my only play. How was your Monday aside from that?
Yeah, well, that wasn't good because I had the Louisville team total over 81 and a half, Adam. And like you say, they get to 74 and go scoreless for the first 6 minutes of the second half. They don't make a shot for 6 minutes and still get to 74. So, like you say, anything half decent over that 6 minute stretch could have obviously changed the ATS outcome, certainly could have changed the team total outcome, but it is what it is. I followed that up with a small play on Houston first half against Kansas and control of the first half almost the entire way, at least the first 15 minutes. And then the roof caved in and that didn't get there. So not a good day yesterday. 2 small plays, 2 small losses. Need to get back on track today, though. I'm really disappointed with both of those efforts
Yep.
out of Louisville. And then, of course, if you extend Houston out to the full game result, you
Yeah.
realize 3 straight losses and not really good in the second half against KU. So credit to Kansas. Again, before we start our opening game here, feature play, I will say this about Melvin Council Jr. I mean, he must have mentioned his name half a dozen, 7, 8 times this year. Fantastic play out of him again yesterday. Kansas had a lot of good efforts, but it just Council to me, boy, St. Bonnie could use a guy like that.
Yeah.
Dear
Yeah, they
Lord.
sure could. Yeah, I'll just say, Chris in the chat says, Houston and Louisville got smoked last night. Yeah, they did. Yesterday was one of those days where I kind of wished I trusted my extra board opinions, all of which seemed to win. I got there with I kind of got scared off of Rio Grande Valley with the steam throughout the day. You could have got as high as 12 and a half for UTRGV yesterday. They ended up covering all numbers, came back, made that a game, and got inside the number there. New Orleans pulls the upset. We kind of talked about thinking that was too many. So in the end, Louisville was by far what I liked the best. And just didn't work out, but we'll get it going today. So, Rob Bino, that brings us to today's feature game. I have a couple. Right now, I have a very short list of things I will actually play today. One of those is 5%er. I love it. It's locked in. It's up on the site. The other one is the game we're going to talk about right now. But boy, did the overnight market suck up all of the value on this game. If you like the Baylor Bears, like I do. So let's talk 9 p.m. Eastern, ESPN2. Baylor, Arizona. And this thing now, some sites are going to tell you that this opened 12 and a half, but that was a very rogue number. That 12 and a half was gone. Some book probably put 12 and a half up at like 2 p.m. yesterday. That was gone very quickly. I think it's a reasonable sort of thing to say that the opener was 10 for this game, but by the time most books got it up, and even that was gone like well into early into the night last night. So by this morning, pretty much 8.5 everywhere. I get why that happened. For me, and I've been critical of this Baylor team all year, Rob. But if there was ever, they have no-showed every single big game this season. They're 4-10 in the Big 12. It just feels like to me, if they were ever to show up for a game, it's here at home. And You got an Arizona team that was battling a team-wide illness. They had some injuries, and they just put in an all-out effort to beat Houston over the weekend. So not a good spot for Arizona, but is this coming into the price range where you're willing to punch back is my question to you.
I mean, we talked a lot about spot plays yesterday. We've talked a lot about situationals this time of year over the course of the last 7 to 10 days. I mean, we really need to bring Marco D'Angelo in here for the commentary on this, because this is, if ever there was in his terms, a sandwich spot, right? It would be here for Arizona. Let's just get beyond what happened Saturday, Adam. You got to realize Arizona's come off the Big 12 gauntlet the last 4 games, right? We actually talked about how their schedule was going to toughen up, and boy, did it ever. But they just played a 4-game stretch where they went to Kansas and lost a game when Darren Peterson didn't play. They followed that up by going back home and losing in overtime to Texas Tech. 2 of the best teams in the league, 2 L's. Home, they play BYU. They get a W. Then they have to go to Houston on top of all of this for their next game with circumstances that you just described, and they get themselves another win. So 2-2 through the gauntlet. Now they take this breather against Baylor on the road, only to have to come back Saturday and play their home revenge game against Kansas, and then get 24 hours worth of rest and play Iowa State next Monday. I mean, the gauntlet is 6 out of the 7 games. It's crazy the schedule Arizona's up against here. So, to our original point, if there was ever a sandwich spot, so to speak, you would think that it's here for Arizona. But I'm going to bring up one thing that, just scares the heck out of me about Baylor here. Baylor's had 7 games this year inside the Big 12 where they played one of the top 7 defenses inside this conference. Their team total has stayed under in 6 of those 7. The only time they got their team total over was when they played Iowa State in the rematch and found a way to get their team total over. But tonight, for those playing totals, the Baylor team total is listed at 73.5. They haven't scored 74 in any of those 7 games against the top 7 defenses in the league. You know who's number 1? Arizona. And so for Baylor to cover, in my mind, against the Arizona defense, Arizona has to just be like, whatever, it's another game. Let's just go win it by 3. Or Baylor's got to shoot lights out because they're going to get nothing on the interior. You start going through numbers and you realize how difficult it should be under normal circumstances for Baylor to score in this game. They're not normal circumstances. If I add the Louisville game to this stretch for Baylor, because Louisville's the number 28 defensive efficiency team in the nation, they're 7-1, under 73.5 points tonight. If this full game total is to get over, and it's been pushed up to 154.5, if it's to get over, you need a minimum 83 out of Arizona. And that's assuming that Baylor's going to get to 73 in this game. Again, spot would lead you to believe, this could happen. Arizona might let up. Defense might not be all there, et cetera, et cetera. No Pete for the 3rd game in a row, whatever. But numbers tell you that Baylor's not capable. And they're going to have to lean on their defense against Arizona, keep it lower scoring. So 154.5 to me, Adam, might be a little high. And Baylor team total at 73.5 might be a little high. Like I say, haven't scored 74 points in any game against a top 7 Big 12 defense. And if you throw Louisville in, they haven't done it against them. They didn't do it against them either. Will Arizona, just score mid-70s, ho-hum, and win this thing? If they do, it's an easy under. So that's the way I'm looking here. I'm not looking specifically at side, but I'm looking more towards playing some form of under. And I have to say, those of you who have watched this show since November, the word under doesn't come out of my mouth very often, and it's come out of my mouth here for this game. So that's the way I'm going to look.
Yeah, Chris, I did not take that as a negative. I took it as you were just kind of pointing out the 2 primetime games did not go our way. And you're right. Many, like Louisville, went off I think they went off -4. I ended up sitting there thinking, man, am I taking a bad number with 2.5? Because again, similar to that game, I mean, 1.5 for Louisville was long gone. That was pretty much an overnight number. And I ended up being there with a pretty decent number on 2.5 at Louisville. That went off 4, similar to, so we talk about this all the time, Rob. We do this show in a window where the market really moves. And I think we found our resistance point live on air for Baylor. So this got down a minute ago as low as 7.5, which is, I make this number Arizona -7. So you can see how at 10, I would start to, maybe want to jump in with Baylor. As soon as it hits 7.5, it's right back up to 8.5 across the board. Makes complete sense. Everything's got a buy. Like, there's always a price that someone else is going to buy in. So what we learned just now is that that 7.5, the other side was willing to come in on Arizona at 7.5, which at least I think keeps it the possibility that Arizona maybe steams back in the other direction throughout, at some point in the day. But so you talked about defense, Rob. Like, having Baylor having to lean on their defense is less than ideal. This is a defense that has been outside the top 100 in defensive efficiency for most of the year. This is something I've noticed. So, my buddy CT went to Baylor, and, him and I have gone to Baylor games, and, I kind of follow Baylor through him. And something that we've talked about this year and even last year, this was a team that won a national championship not that long ago, 2021. They've won it in the era of like transfer portal and NIL. Like, they have a national championship. It's only 2026. That wasn't that long ago. And the difference between those Baylor teams and the teams of the last couple of years is Baylor just gets torched by like good offense. They get absolutely smoked. They're like, Scott Drew's just not getting the guards that like play good defense anymore. And that's a problem of this team. Now, if you think that maybe Arizona's in a position where they're going to go through the motions a little bit offensively, maybe their offense is not as crisp as it typically is, that's where I think you can make your case for the Baylor cover, because that's what Baylor is actually not terrible offensively. When you start to look at the numbers, they're top 40 offensive efficiency. They're 47.8% from the field. That's a top 50 mark nationally. They score 82.6 points a game. That's pretty much a top 50 mark nationally. They don't have the 3-point. I think the difference between this Baylor team and the last couple Baylor teams that I also thought were bad, but at least were like, could fool you into thinking that they were good, was the Baylor teams of the last couple of years could really shoot the three. This Baylor team is inconsistent from beyond the arc, and that's why they're not able to stay in some of these games. But, it's one of those days where I do think if you don't get Arizona's sharpest effort, which coming off of a team-wide illness, coming off of the Houston win, coming off of the gauntlet that you talked about, Rob, BYU, Houston, Texas Tech, all the tough games that they've played, having to go to Waco in sort of like a sandwich type spot where maybe you're looking ahead a little bit. This might be Arizona not bringing their best effort. I still think Arizona can win this game without their best effort, but again, Baylor has not come to play in a big game all year. You have to think that matters a little bit here. Like, you've got to think that that's a motivator for Baylor. Like, hey, this is your last big game at Foster Pavilion this year in front of the home fans, because I think their only remaining home game, they'll probably be a pretty big favorite in there. It's not like a top team. I think if Baylor shows up, they can win the game. I think if Baylor kind of shows up, they probably stay within 10. So if the market would do me a favor and steam it back to 10, that would be great, so I can bet Baylor. At the current price, I don't know if I can do it, but I still think they probably cover here.
Yeah, it is one of those games, Adam, where situational spot can definitely overcome fundamental matchups. If it doesn't, Baylor gets smoked again.
Yes.
You're betting Baylor, and college basketball is a sport where it's often bet that way. Bet the spot. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, and there couldn't be a more ideal situation for Baylor to be in than the one they're in with this opponent walking in tonight, because you have to believe Arizona's got their eye on Kansas revenge on Saturday. There's no question. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I just want to wrap it up by saying, like, I really like Baylor plus the points. and I'm just a really stubborn individual. And because even though I don't count that opener at 12.5, I really count it more like 10. I don't know if I can take what I would consider not enough at 8.5. But if this, I'll tell you right now, if this gets back to even 9.5 or 10 at some point today, I'm probably clicking Baylor plus the points. Just
can we get a syndicate group to hit the Arizona side really hard right now?
Yes. Can someone respected or that bots accounts please bet Arizona for us?
Right.
It'd be much appreciated. Anyway, look at all the donations rolling in. Someone alert Kelly in Vegas right now. The donations are coming in because we're like, Rob and I are always like, hey, our show gets a lot of donations. We just want to know if we're just trying to be the best. That's all Rob and I want. So if we get more donations than the other shows, that's all we really care about. Regardless of what show gets it, they all go to a good cause. I don't know what the cause is for February yet, but I'm sure. I think last month it was. Why can't I remember the charity from last month?
JD told us it was Opportunity Village in Las Vegas.
Yes, that's right.
An organization that does great work. I actually have some, secondary personal contact to that. A good friend of mine had a sister with Down syndrome who actually went there as a teenager, wound up working there. So, they do outstanding work. But the donations go there for any of you that want to know where this money goes. Or if you're just contributing because you love me and Adam every morning, that's great too. But it is going to a really, really good place. I can vouch for that.
So thank you, RC Colo, for the super sticker. That's a new one, Rob. Super sticker. They throw something new in here every day. Super chat, super sticker. We appreciate you, RC. We do have a number of them tied to a game. So let's I'm just going to pick these at random here. It looks like people want to talk Big 12 basketball today. So let's keep it going. Let's go to I'll get to all of them, but let's start here. This is Mad Max. Mad Max says overrated Cincinnati. Yeah, I got I don't know if we can go back and edit the part out of Saturday's last call show where I said, oh, it won't matter. Kansas will cover any number. I'd like to have that one back. Overrated Cincinnati coming off of an upset of Kansas. Underrated Texas Tech is at home. Only loss there versus Arizona, Houston. Thoughts on spread and team total? My thought is Cincinnati overrated at this point? Or is this just because here, and the reason I say that is this. We are in the era of college basketball where it's reasonable for a team to mature over the course of a season, where it's like this, the team figures it out in February where they're completely lost in November. Rob, back in the day, this used to take years, right? Because you'd have a team, maybe they'd start to figure out in year 1 or 2, and then the next year they'd come back and realize the potential. But that doesn't really happen in college basketball anymore because none of these teams are the same from year to year. So if you think about it like that, and you start with a team that hasn't played much together, theoretically, November and December could be a disaster. Maybe they start to figure it out in January. Maybe you have to judge a team by what they've looked like the past few games. And Cincinnati's looked really good. And then you look at Wes Miller's career, his teams tend to defend. So it's easy to say oh, Cincinnati's overrated and whatnot, and they're probably going to get smashed. But in this spot, you have a Texas Tech team that's dealing with injuries. They're going to be without one of their best players for the rest of the season. And a Cincinnati team that, man, that Kansas game has me thinking maybe we shouldn't just knee-jerk bet against this team. But boy, do I really not. I'm not going to be late. I'm not going to be late to the party, Rob. I hate that. So I don't know if I can bet Cincinnati here, but I don't know if I can lay it with Texas Tech either. Any thoughts on that? And what about the team total?
Yeah, I think and there's so many of these games. I went up and down the card last night, early this morning, Adam. There are so many games where situational circumstance comes into play. This one, I would say the question that I had to ask myself was the route of Kansas State the other day by Texas Tech after suffering the devastating loss of JT Toppin the prior game. Was that just a banding of players together? Let's go out there, we'll do it for JT, et cetera, and they blew Kansas State out. Or is that just a product of Kansas State being an absolute dumpster fire at this point in time, right? And you could look at it either way, but I would choose to look at it from the standpoint that, Texas Tech, you can't lose a player like JT Toppin and be as good as you were consistently game after game after game. And this one's interesting because, Adam, I'll tell you what, back in December, they were calling for Wes Miller's head. Like the Cincinnati alum, the Cincinnati fan base, the Cincinnati media wanted Wes Miller out of there. And he's kind of turned a corner with this team. They had a couple of solid wins along the way. And even up until the Kansas game, I think you could still question Cincinnati by saying the 3-game win streak came against nobody, the Big 12 seller, so to speak. But the win against Kansas, you saw Kansas play last night, was huge. And if nothing else, they play intense defense, which Texas Tech did not have to face against Kansas State the other day. They do make some shots. I mean, I believe when I looked it up this morning, that Edgerrin James' son is like top 50 3-point shooter in the country.
Jizzle.
They can make some threes. Yeah. They've got really good guard play, which is important against Texas Tech. And if you can hit the boards with some tenacity like Cincinnati can, I don't know why they can't stay in this game, honestly, Adam. I kind of look to their side. Wes Miller, in fact, let me just get back to Texas Tech and Grant McCaslin, the point that I made to start this. Everybody indulge me here because I'm going to come at you with a couple of quotes. You know how I am with those. But Grant McCaslin basically said, our team came together and played for each other. It really says a lot about this group, how much they love each other, and how competitive we were through a tough game and situation. That's what I meant earlier about banding together for one game. Is that going to continue? Does that run fluid through the remainder of the Texas Tech schedule? Kansas State is the ideal team to play in that situation without JT Toppin, especially if you're highly motivated to go out there and, I don't want to say us against them kind of chip on the shoulder, but you get what I mean. Lose your top player and want to come out and band together. They did it. Can they do it here? I would lean more toward Cincinnati in this particular spot. However, the one thing you have to worry about somewhat, Adam, is this is two tough road venues to go into in a row. Winning in Allen Fieldhouse, and you're going to ask them to come back and do it again in Lubbock. But honestly, I think when I break it down fundamentally, they can remain within the number here. So my look would be towards Cincinnati plus the points here. No real opinion on the total, although there's been a little slight movement here toward the over. I have to tell you, the more I look at the number, the more I would say this. It's kind of low, 141.5. I think Texas Tech, yes, they lose some offense with Toppin, but I also think they lose some defense with Toppin out. So I'm going to take a slight lean towards that over, but say that plus 6.5 looks like a pretty good number. And I do see it, for those of you who have these more popular accounts across the country, the more accommodating the ones, that you can catch a 7 out there.
Oh yeah, I think you'll be able to catch 7s a lot of places at some point. I don't think this is done moving toward Texas Tech. And the reason for that is I still think many have Texas Tech power rated fairly high, even with the injuries and even with based on where, I know I had for a long time. I think I talked about it last week where I'm like, Rob, I show value on Texas Tech every game because I thought coming into the year they were a Final Four team. And it's so that's been a challenge for me to sort of downgrade Texas Tech from where I had them, coming into the season, and now to sort of factor in the injury stuff. I've had a hard time, kind of trusting my number for the game. But if I throw my number out here and just look at it from a handicapping standpoint, once you get to 7 and 7.5, I do think you can make a reasonable case for Cincinnati plus the points. That's how I'll lean on this one with you. I'll agree with you there. I think I would want at least 7 because I do think it probably gets to 7 most places throughout the course of the day. One thing I'll point out with Cincinnati, even when they were struggling early in the season, they played pretty good defense. And that is the hallmark of a Wes Miller team, right? Go back to his Greensboro teams or any team Wes Miller has ever coached. They're always defensive grinder type teams, right? It's defense first, offense will take care of itself. That's sort of been his MO as a head coach throughout his coaching career. Rob, right now, defensive rating in KenPom, 11 for Cincinnati. That's very good. And you don't just get that from playing 4 good games, right? Like, that's a season-long metric right there. This team has defended at a high level all season. It's just, there's games like, go back. I'll go all the way back to November. They defended Louisville well, but they only scored 64 points, right? Like, they defended. There's other examples, like defended Clemson well, but they lost 68-65. Houston, 67-60. They played good defense in that game. West Virginia, 62-60. Another game where their defense had them right in the game, but they simply could not score enough points. UCF, 73-72. You're starting to get the theme here of like Cincinnati, their defense has had them in games all year. And the 11th ranked defense doesn't happen overnight. The difference is last couple games, they dropped 92 on UCF. They put up 91 on Kansas State. The offense was serviceable over the weekend, 84 on Kansas. Yes, it got a little out of hand at the end. So they found a way to put the ball in the basket more than they had early in the season. But the thing that's still there, that's the reason that they're starting to end up on the right side of these games, is the defense has been good since early in the season. You want to talk about a quote? How about Wes Miller, basically in tears, going to address the fans after, I forget what game it was, Rob, but he basically went out. You really don't see coaches do this very often. It may have been the home loss to West Virginia, where he went over to the fans and was like, "You guys deserve better." And he was like borderline in tears. They've won 4 straight since that. So whether he's rallied the troops and he's got everyone sort of buying in, that's all whatever. But one thing you can't dispute is that defensive rating being 11 is bordering on elite. And I think they're doing just enough to be on the right side of these wins, or I'm sorry, on the right side of these results as opposed to the wrong side. But even if you go back in the beginning of the season, there's evidence of them keeping a game within 7 against a quality team. So I think when you get to that 7 and 7.5 range, you really got to start to like Cincinnati here.
Yeah, real quick, Adam, until this 4-game stretch, Cincinnati had not shot 48% for a game in any Big 12 game this season. They've done that 3 of the last 4. And again, I get the opposition, aside from Kansas, hasn't been great. But just for Cincinnati to start seeing the ball go through the basket, I think is pretty helpful here for this team. So I think we're on the same page here. I would look to take points situationally and fundamentally. I think we're both pretty much based in the fact that their defense is good enough to keep this one close.
All right. Speaking of taking points, let's head over to our guy, Paul Powell. Thank you for the donation. Much appreciated. He says, and we're going to stay in the Big 12. Big 12 is the theme today of this show. He says, I hammered Utah plus 13.5, minus 120 against Iowa State. I like the play so much, I took it 2 times before the line changed. Yeah, it looks like Paul's moving the line out here, Rob. It's down to 12.5. I wish you got to give us a heads up before you do that. But still, we're at 12.5 here. This is Utah, the Huntsman Center out in Salt Lake City. They're going to host an Iowa State team that fell victim to a good Cincinnati defensive performance earlier this season as well. Went to so we know. I guess the reason I bring that up is we know that Iowa State is mortal at this point. They were running on a stretch. It feels like a lot of these Big 12 teams, Rob, have had their stretch where they looked invincible, right? Where they just looked like totally invincible, and then they came back to earth, and the Big 12 caught up with them. Iowa State's no difference. They had this crazy run, believe they were unbeaten. They go lose to Kansas. They lose to Cincinnati. Since then, they have a road loss at TCU, and then over the weekend, they lost to a BYU team that a lot of people thought were kind of like dead and buried, right? Like there was not many people giving BYU a chance last week to win a big game. And BYU came out on Saturday night and knocks off this Iowa State team by 10. So if you're Iowa State, you've been hanging out in Utah for a couple of days as my light dies and I am now in the dark, but don't worry, I've got a backup So we're no longer by the campfire. Hold on a second, Robino. We're back. There we are.
Look at that.
The light is back. Yeah, so this is interesting. Paul Powell says Utah, he liked it at 13.5. He knocked this spread down to 12.5. Iowa State comes off the BYU loss, and they're still out there. Obviously an easier opponent, but is this too many points in your opinion?
Well, if you go through Utah's schedule, they played 14 Big 12 games. Only 2 of those were decided by 14 or more. One, a loss to Arizona. Okay, so you lost to Arizona by more than 14. And the other one was against Texas Tech. Otherwise, win or lose, where Utah is concerned, every single one of those other 14 games, so 12 of them, have been played within this number of 13.5, something from 13 or less. So, if you're just playing the numbers game and the results game with Utah, it makes a lot of sense to take 13.5. Iowa State fell victim to, and again, let's talk about situation. Let's talk about spot. Iowa State beats Kansas, absolutely drills Kansas. Not yesterday, Monday, but 8 days ago, Monday, right? Beat them by almost 20. Come back. They're trailing Houston. I don't know, was it 63-53 with about 5 minutes left? Come back and win that game at home. So 2 huge wins at home. Kansas and Houston. Then get on the plane and fly into altitude against a BYU team that had lost Richie Sanders, had lost the prior game, needed a win in the worst way because I think we were starting to shovel the dirt on BYU as a Big 12 contender. And AJ DeBansta again does his thing. BYU does their thing, and they win that game. So situationally, that game, that loss on Saturday for Iowa State, as there are many of those examples inside the Big 12, it can be justified with a legitimate argument. Whether or not you believe it or not is one thing, but it can be justified with a legitimate situational argument. Now you play Utah, who you would expect the Iowa State offense to pick back up because Utah is the worst defensive efficiency team in the Mountain West. So you expect Iowa State's offense to get going here tonight. And if you're going to cover with Utah, they'll lean on their strength, which has been their ability to score in certain instances. They've got a pretty decent set of guards on this team, and they can score the basketball with their backcourt and wings. So to me, more than side here because I don't want to mess around with this number from what I described previously. 12 of Utah's 14 league games have fallen under this number. But I think total is definitely in play here. Now, Iowa State, as we know, Adam, really good defensive team. Do they come out and just shut Utah down? I'm not so sure. I think Utah can get enough of the job done here to the point where 144 just looks low to me. I don't expect Utah to have another bad offensive game. I just think that they fell a little bit victim to 2 monster wins, a flight to altitude, and a hungry BYU team. So for me, it would be a look toward over. That number currently sits been bet down a little bit, 145.5 down to 144.5. But you can find 144s for those who want to shop really well. I would probably be on that side over 144.
Yeah, I was 13.6 on my own spread here. So I'm pretty much right in line with where it opened. I don't have a huge desire to go against Iowa State coming off of the BYU loss. I do think, though, I do think that was sort of such a desperate spot for BYU. And they, of course, had a couple of games to figure out how to play without Saunders and then game plan for Iowa State that I think I'm not going to hold that against Iowa State as much as I'm just going to say, you know what, BYU, they've still got some players, right? Earlier in the week, they gave Arizona a game, and I think they just kind of came in with a good game plan. The Banstas played really well, and they were able to get a win there. So that, to me, that was more of a very solid result for a BYU team that probably had a good result coming to them than it was this terrible sort of loss for Iowa State. I don't think it was as bad of a loss as maybe some people think. There's definitely concern, there's definite concerns with laying 13 on the road with this Iowa State team. Team's 4-4 on the road And, some of these games, right? You look at Iowa State road games, not competitive. We talked about the loss to Cincinnati, not competitive with Kansas. Um, lost to TCU. The BYU one over the weekend. Only won at Waco by 10, right? Like, because again, you start to kind of go through you start to go through a little bit and say, who are the other bottom teams in this league, right? Well, Baylor's kind of down there, only won that game by 10. So yeah, like again, this is just not one that I have like a huge personal opinion on. My number puts it right in line with the market, but I think there's cases to be made for both sides. Personally, I would not want to go against Iowa State off of the loss. But you're talking, listen, if you got 13 and a half and the market is pretty much at 12 and a half, I'm not really going to argue with you there. You probably have a decent number, but I would need more like 16 to want any part of Utah here. They're just not a team that I found to have redeeming qualities like some of the other, like, for example, I'll just make the example. We've talked now about 3 Big 12 games. I would much rather have Baylor or Cincinnati as underdogs tonight than Utah. Just to put it in the context of today's slate. I think they have less redeeming qualities than the other 2 underdogs in the Big 12 that we've talked about so far on the show. So again, sorry I don't have more for you there, Paul. But yeah, I guess we'll leave that one at that. All right. Let's go to Garth. Let's get out of the Big 12 for a second, and let's go to Garth. And he said, oh boy, here we go. He says, let's look at the bottom of the Mountain West with San Jose and Air Force. I'm going to let you kick this one off, Rob. He likes the over 142.5. This is a great stat, though. Combined 24-8 to the over in conference play. And I actually saw Jim Root, our buddy Jim Root from 3-Man Weave, on one of his shows, kind of talking about Air Force games going over so far since Mountain West play has started. Some of that's probably because a lot of Air Force games get out of hand because they're not in many games. And then you just kind of get this free-for-all the last few minutes. So where are you at on that? Total? It's ticked up a tiny bit. Do you like that over San Jose State and Air Force?
I mean, there's zero reason. I guess I shouldn't say zero reason, because those who want to go by the analytics will tell you San Jose State and Air Force are the 2 least efficient offenses in the Mountain West. But what overrides that is they're the 2 worst defenses in the Mountain West. And Air Force, for what it's worth, Adam, generally we consider Air Force, Joe Scott, Princeton offense, last in tempo every single year, limit possessions. They're not that this year. They're like an upper echelon, or at least middle of the pack as far as pace is concerned for Air Force. It's different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was such a weird situation, right? They let you know way back, I think the end of December, early January, Joe Scott's not going to return. And then they just officially fire him like last week or a couple days before. I mean, why not just fire
Probably
the guy way back? Yeah, so it's been kind of a miserable season for Air Force, and especially on the defensive end. I can understand what Garth is saying. You could even look to play San Jose State if you wanted to focus in, because I would be more inclined, and I don't know why, but I would be more inclined to fade the Air Force defense. It's just been so terrible. And the fact that they allow teams to play tempo now, because they play tempo with you, just is why you get these higher scoring games. And, we talk a little bit, Adam, on this show about odds makers and their quickness to adjust. I don't think Air Force really was ever adjusted in the totals market by odds makers the way they probably should have been. The increase in tempo wasn't really recognized. They're still Air Force. They're still perceived in a certain way. And it has led, in my estimation at least, it has led to a lot of these games getting over. Garth, I wouldn't talk you off of it. The 24-8 number combined, I wasn't aware of, but I know Air Force games have been going over like crazy the second half of this season. So I would say that you're probably onto something there. I don't know if Air Force currently is adjusted enough in the totals market. I mean, to be staring at a 142.5, and the market moved it, right? Market went from 141 up to 142.5. They see what's coming here. I just don't know that it's been compensated for enough, considering the style of play that Air Force has played and the absolute train wreck that is their defense. Even San Jose State's going to put their numbers up against this team today. At least they should. So I'm with you, Garth.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you too. So here's the reason that Air Force does not play the crawling slow pace anymore. Because last year when they did that, they had a good guy by the name of Ethan Taylor, who was one of the best players in this league, kind of stuck on like a bad Air Force team, but he was still one of the top individual players in the Mountain West. So last year, essentially, because I bet way too much Air Force basketball to admit to anyone last year. I don't know why I felt the need to keep getting involved with that team last year, but I did. The way they would essentially play was they tried to have as few possessions in the game as possible because they knew at worst case scenario, Ethan Taylor could probably bail them out at the end of the shot clock. And so so basically the way Scott looked at it, I think, was, okay, well, let's give our opponents as few possessions as possible. But at least when we get 30 seconds into a terrible possession, we got a guy that can probably just make a tough shot and bail us out. So problem is this year, Air Force does not have that. And I think they learned very, very early into the season that they didn't have it. Because if you look at how they started this year, lost to Belmont, lost to Austin Peay, lost to Long Island, lost to Miami of Ohio, barely beat Alabama State, lost to South Dakota, lost to Pacific. Like this, I think after that, you probably had, and maybe it's just the assistant. Now that Joe Scott's not there, maybe they said, you know what, let's not do this. We can't beat a mid-major doing this. Let's just do something different. I think that's probably why you're seeing this crazy run to the over, because like you said, Rob, there you look at like the pace ratings, they might only be middle of the pack, but this was a team that was in the low three. They were in the 330s, 340s, 350s for a couple of years. So yeah, it's possible that the market has not adjusted to an 100 spot move in tempo, even though it doesn't look, you look and say, oh, well, they don't play very fast at 250th in the country, or I think they're 258th right now. That's still a pretty big difference between what they were last year, what they were at the beginning of this year, and what they're trying to be now. Now, is it working? No, they still haven't won a league game, but maybe it's like, okay, at least if we're trying to get shots up, maybe we give ourselves a chance. Maybe that's the theory here going forward. If they're ever going to have a chance to win a league game, it's probably this one, right? This would be the one opponent in the Mountain West that they might be able to beat. The first meeting in San Jose was 70-62. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm with Garth. I want zero part of trying to back Air Force as an underdog. I'd much rather just go for the points. 132 in the first meeting, and they're probably playing faster. That was earlier in conference play. So they are probably playing faster now than they were going into that game. So it would be over or pass for me here as well.
You jogged my memory, Adam, because when you said Air Force lost to Belmont, that was so long ago to open the season. I believe that was one of our very first parlay legs. I played Belmont that night.
Yes, opening night
total. And I remember you saying that Air Force is one of the worst teams in the country, and agreeing with the play that I had. I think BP was with us then, but that's, what we stated way back in early November has really come to fruition with Air Force. They are truly one of the worst teams in the country. So much so that I've seen some calling out for Air Force to just drop in class and go play Division II.
Yeah,
you can't do that.
Go to the Big Western. So the problem is they can't do that because football controls all, and they actually still field a reasonably competitive football team. I love this right here. Richie, thank you for the donation. He says, Triggers inspired me to seek out smaller CBB venues. I absolutely love that. DM me, hit me up. Let me know where you're located. And if we're ever in the same area, I'll take you to a game with me. I've done that with a couple. Met Ethan Bainbridge, who's always in the comments. We took him to Bowling Green earlier this year, had a blast. It's fun to one of the benefits of me just sort of being out on the road is sometimes I'm in your area and then get to meet you guys, which is always fun. So yeah, whether it's this year or next year, let me know. Let me know where you're located and we'll get you out to a game if you'd like to go to a game. And that really goes for anyone. Just if you see me stroll into town like randomly, because it's always like, I just fly by the seat of my pants, Rob. I didn't really know I was going to Newark on Saturday night till I was there. Let me know. We'll get you out to a game. All right, we'll go donation here from Mad Max. Talk a little Big Ten basketball, and then we'll go to Rob's game after this because I think we've already talked about mine. So let's go to Mad Max here. He says Northwestern off a big win over Maryland. Indiana got pounded by Purdue. Yeah, they got pounded by Purdue in that game. Was a little annoyed with myself for not recognizing that might be the case, but they got absolutely throttled. Northwestern giving up 36% from three in conference play. Rob, I love that our viewers not only now ask for a game, donate to our charity, and then bring us stats to set up the play. I don't even have to look at these on the fly. Mad Max is like laying out. He's giving us all the numbers here. He says if Indiana hits their threes, it's going to be a long game for Northwestern. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Indiana has been much better at home. Indiana has hit shots at a higher rate at home. I'm with Mad Max there. If Indiana hits their threes, it's probably a long night for Northwestern. What do you agree, disagree? And he says, any thought on the team total?
Well, impossible to disagree with it. I mean, I think it's Bayou, right? Bayou told us. Where does he claim the soft rims are? Florida Atlantic?
Yeah, Florida Atlantic. He's convinced that the Ellie has pillow soft rims at the Ellie. Yeah.
For years, I've been saying the same about Bloomington. They just favor Indiana so much. I don't know why, but Indiana, this is not a new thing where Indiana scores better at home, shoots better at home. Doesn't matter what squad they have. They're generally a far better shooting team at home. And I couldn't disagree with a move toward the total here. In fact, I was the Purdue game had to have been Friday night because I believe I played Purdue team total over in, like what you said. I think it was a sort of an anger game, a get back game for Purdue off of a loss. Here, there's a lot of positive quotes, and Chris Collins has generally been a positive head coach. Don't always get positive results, but Northwestern still views themselves as a team that can play with anybody inside the Big Ten, according to Nick Martinelli, their top offensive player. I would think that Indiana is going to score the simple breakdown. Simplistically, Indiana probably gets theirs against Northwestern. Indiana's defense has not been locked down all season long. We've talked about Wilkerson a little bit. He's about impossible to defend at this point in time inside the Big Ten. We've talked about Tucker DeVries a lot on this show, that he hasn't come to play against the upper echelon, against the Big Ten. Maybe he's in over his head a little bit. It's not the Missouri Valley anymore. But against this style team, I'd expect DeVries to contribute. I'd expect all the Indiana guys to contribute. Leads me to the point where, can you get enough out of Northwestern to go ahead and get this thing up and over? And I kind of believe you do, and I hesitate in saying that because of Northwestern's tempo. Like when I play overs, I always want enough scoring opportunities. And Northwestern, if they have a lead in this game at any point, that's when these teams that play slow tempo really slow it down when they have leads. But if Indiana gets out quick in this one, which they've been known to do at home, have big first halves, I think there's probably no issue here getting up and over 145.5. The game really remains the same. I'm looking at a couple of 146s as we speak, and one stray 146.5. So guys, again, if you're in the Las Vegas area, we're not allowed to pinpoint or tell you exactly where to go. But if you're in the Las Vegas area, you can find a 144.5. So if you like over, shop it well. I think it's probably the right way to go here.
Yeah, and I'll just hammer this home. My number is on the side of Indiana winning this game by double digits. So if you are, with the original comment, I've got to agree with you. If Indiana's getting what they want offensively, if the shots are falling, this certainly feels like one that they could run up if they want to, and that probably means by more than 9, because it looks like you could get 8.5 at present, which is probably good. Jacob, I don't know if you're serious about this, but North Florida may be where I am on Thursday. So I'm trying to go surprise my grandma for her birthday this weekend down in Florida, because my parents are down there and stuff like that. And I'm trying to make like a last second. Hopefully Graham is not watching Full Court Press right now. I doubt she is, Rob, because that would ruin.
Why not?
It would ruin the surprise. But I do think North Florida is where I will be on Thursday, because it's like one of the only ones that makes sense. So, yeah, if you were serious about that, hit me up. I may be checking out North Florida, Florida Gulf Coast on Thursday. So let me know. All right, Rob, I'm going to give the floor to you. Do you know what game you want to use for the parlay? Have we talked about it? Have we not? If we haven't, why don't you throw a game out there for us to talk about?
We haven't talked about it, and I've got kind of an extensive card today, Adam. There's so many situational plays that I want to be on. I'm going to have to shave it down for clients, and I'll get my $5 play up when this show ends. But I'm going to go to one that's as simple can get. Really doesn't need a ton of explanation, but I often use the phrase, somebody's got to pay. And somebody's got to pay for what happened to Michigan against Duke this past weekend, and that somebody's going to end up being Minnesota. I think tonight I like the Michigan team total up and over 83.5. Listen, I just talked about Northwestern and Indiana and a hesitancy to go ahead and just full out jump to the window and bet that game over because of Northwestern's tempo. You could say the same about Minnesota, right? Nico Medved's team is even slower, but in that same breath, handicapping theory of mine, and I think this bears out, you can't control tempo when you're behind. And Minnesota, in all likelihood, finds themselves behind at Michigan early on in this one, and all of a sudden you can't crawl anymore. You've got to catch up at some point, or at least attempt to catch up at some point. Michigan's likely to control every defensive board, likely to control every defensive board. They'll get out, they'll run. There's a little bit, one situational thing that you have to consider is, does the letdown carry over to this game? I doubt it with Michigan. Dusty May, and we've talked about him a lot too, but there's something about this guy that you watch him in that press conference after Duke telling you that we're going to learn from this, but you can see with a lot of coaches, you can read between the lines that Dusty May's not one of these guys that's going to let up on his team for this game. He's going to be relentless in the fact that we need to blow somebody out. And boy, they have the material to blow somebody out here. I think that somebody's Minnesota. Point spread wise, a little afraid to lay it simply because we've seen Michigan go this year on a 1-8 ATS run, being overpriced inside the Big Ten. But asking them to score 84 points, I don't think is all that difficult here. And I don't, again, you try to keep a notebook on these guys, at least I do, a small notebook on coaches that don't mind scoring and running it up at the end of games. Dusty May's one of these guys that just doesn't let off the gas pedal. If he's got, a 20, 22, 24-point lead, they're still going to score. So for me, it's Michigan team total over 83.5 tonight. I think this gets us back on the right track with our parlay legs. That's where I'm going, Adam. Despite Minnesota's slow tempo, I don't think that comes into play here. Michigan fundamental advantages are way too huge. Motivational advantage, way too huge. And real quick, I'll add this. Nico Medved actually said after they beat Rutgers that their number one goal right now is to avoid playing Tuesday in the Big Ten tournament. And that win was like crucial for them. Mm-hmm. If you try and take that, what they put into that game, the effort, the max effort, the 100% effort that they put into beating Rutgers on Saturday, and now go to play Michigan, it's almost like, we accomplished what we wanted to do. If we get smoked here, it might not matter. So I don't know that Minnesota is really in the market of thinking they're going to beat Michigan or play them close here tonight.
Yeah, do we rule out the possibility of Minnesota contributing enough to get this over the full game? Because that's kind of the way I look at it. I don't hate the idea of Minnesota kind of competing in garbage time here to make sure that this one gets over either way. I mean, if you like the total, it's going to be difficult to hit a full game total without Michigan doing their part. But I don't rule out Minnesota from contributing to that total. Rob, what was the number you got on this team total here?
I show 83.5. Right? Yeah, 83.5. 15-cent juice I'm showing, Adam. So not
Yep.
overly priced.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at 85.1 for a projection for Minnesota, or I'm sorry, for Michigan. So that would suggest that it's over the team total. But again, my Minnesota projection does keep it slightly within this number. So again, that's sort of where I think the math is going to work out for the total either way on this. I think I think Minnesota likely does enough, but yeah, I mean, the thing that's probably easier to handicap / rely on is Michigan doing their part. So I'm with you there, Rob. I think they probably listen, I just don't know that the Duke loss is not crushing by any means. It's a non-conference exhibition game in the middle of February, neutral site. I kind of think it's going to be like back to regularly scheduled programming here for Michigan. And if that's the case, I don't know. It's tough to say if a team will cover 22, but I certainly don't think getting to they probably score 90. Like we've seen this, we've seen Michigan do this in the past, right? Against these lower tier Big Ten teams. They dropped 110 against Penn State. You'd have to go back to, I wonder if this is a little deceiving. Like a lot of their Big Ten games are right around this number, right around this 83, 84 number. But yeah, you would think after only scoring 63 against Duke, that this would be that there might be some emphasis on sort of a 40 minutes of offense here. And the 3 games prior to Duke were 87, 86, 91, and 86 and 91 against UCLA team that's playing a lot better now, and of course against Purdue. So I'm with you, Rob. I'll be rooting home the Michigan team total over. I think that's probably the best way to play that game.
Little step down in defensive class too from Duke to Minnesota.
Yes,
Duke was tough on the boards, boy. Michigan didn't expect that type of resistance on the boards, I don't think, but they got it on Saturday. Shout out to
Jacob.
Grandma. There we go.
Yeah, Jacob, DM me on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days. I'll take care of the tickets to that game. If anyone's in the Jacksonville area and wants to join us for the thriller that will be North Florida, Florida Gulf Coast, hit me up. I'll make it happen for you guys. I don't think it's going to be a standing room only crowd, but we'll see. A couple years ago, North Florida was filling that building pretty good. They've fallen on a little bit of tough times, but yeah, hit me up on Twitter. All right. I want to do this, Rob. I am going to put the Baylor Bears in the parlay. I am going to consult the board here and see what the consensus number is. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 9 minus 120. Okay. Because the 8.5s are pretty prominent out there right now, most places. So for my leg of the parlay, I'm going to go Baylor 9 minus 120 because that puts me within 1 point of where I would play this for clients. So we did a pretty long breakdown of this game at the beginning of the show. If you missed it, go back and check that out. But this 2-teamer, we will do Michigan team total over 83.5 with minus 115 juice. And then I'm going to put Baylor plus 9 minus 120. It's not a big deal if you have to pay more for either of those legs. You're still going to get plus money on the parlay. But I'll tell you right now, if Baylor somehow gets back to 10, probably going to hit my client card. So it's a game I like quite a bit, and that's going to be my parlay leg. Again, 2-teamer, Baylor plus 9, Michigan team total over 83.5. It's $5 Tuesday. Everyone's got all the handicappers have a $5 play up on the site. Right now, I have a 5% play, which is full price. We never sell the 5%ers at the $5 rate, but I can't help that the game I love falls on a Tuesday. So sorry about that, but I do like this one quite a bit. That is up on my page. And again, you can avoid all of that by just getting the double the CBB firepower package. That is 3 days of everything I play, everything Rob plays. Package is pretty much going to pay for itself on day one, knowing that you're going to get a 5%er tonight. So again, love something tonight. It's up 5% play on my page. We have hit the hour mark. We will see you guys in the morning for more Full Court Press. Good luck today, everyone. And we will see you guys tomorrow. Cash all your tickets. Have a great day.